Hello everyone, it's your boy Amigo Aaron here. Tonight, got a special treat that's been months in the making, and I thought I would film it for posterity and for those interested parties out there on YouTube. So, flashback to January 2020, before the whole year went down the crapper, and we thought we might have something good going. And it started off great, at least for John Boat of Carshaller, who made his way to Ireland for the big Irish Amiga convention over there, Amiga Ireland 2020. Good time was had by all. Better time for some than others. Some of us had to stay behind. And I found myself watching the festivities on Twitter with several other people in the Amiga community, some luminaries such as Doug from the 10-minute Amiga Retrocast, and all of a sudden something made its way across my gaze, and what it was this webpage right here. This is the Aaronet Retro Products webpage, and this little item is the UnAmiga A500 Header. Now, I'd never heard of this product. Well, that's not true. I'd heard of it, but didn't give it much thought because it didn't get a whole lot of coverage the first go around. But I started reading these statistics on this thing, and it looked great. I mean, if we look through here, you've got it's got an FPGA on it. You can see right here, 24-bit video DAC output to a VGA, power with a micro USB. You've got your it comes with a micro SD reader. It's a 14-bit audio DAC. It's got two different outputs for the audio, Joystick and Amiga mouse support. You can also plug in a PS2 mouse or keyboard. It's got basically a built-in GoTech for all intents and purposes. It also fits a Checkmate case, and it runs at A20 quite nicely, allegedly, with 20 megs of memory and 2 megs of chip RAM. Everything on here looked great, and the price was particularly appealing, 125 euros. Which, as I recall, was at the time was somewhere in the ballpark of 150 bucks. A pretty good deal, it seemed like, for such an item. Now, I must admit that I was watching the festivities in Ireland in a jealous way because I didn't get to go, and it looked like it was a lot of fun. I didn't get to go last year either. And so I thought to myself, well, since you didn't get to go to Amiga Ireland, you can get yourself a goodie. And so I bought myself two things that day. I bought a GoTech with a display for my A1200, and I went ahead and purchased an Amiga. And I wasn't the only one. I know Doug purchased one. Several other people purchased them. There weren't a ton of these things to be divvied out, but I thought I'm going to jump on this. And shipping was promised sometime a couple months later. Seemed like a good deal. So this was, I believe, the end of January, and you know what happened in March. The whole world went south, and in big chunks of the world, it was before March. It was, of course, it came across, the COVID virus came across, started in China and moved right across, and sure enough, we all got hit. Well, it caused all sorts of production, manufacturing, and shipping issues that were, I mean, you had to forgive them because we were on the same boat, and it was just something that happened. And so I knew it was going to be a good while before my UnAmiga arrived. I will say that the fellow, I hope his name's pronounced Edu, E-D-U, he was very forthcoming with what he was going through. There was no panic. He pretty much had everything lined up. It just took a little longer than we expected. So, I have eagerly been checking my mail over the past weeks and months. Now, about 2 weeks ago, I got word that Doug received his in the mail. And I was very excited because I was hoping mine would come any day. Well, it did not. They drug on and on. But finally today, when I got home from work, lo and behold, this package arrived here from España, Spain, home of Eduardo, and lo and behold, I believe this is the item in question. And so, gentle viewer, I'm going to open this right now. I'm going to attempt to open it, and we're going to gaze upon what you get. What's in the box, as it were. You can see I've never opened this. I mean, it's Loctite, taped everywhere. We're going to look at it together and see what's in this sucker, and then we're going to put it in, and we're going to fool with it, and see, kick the tires on it, if you will. See how it goes. So, this also supposedly comes with a SD card, so I'm just going to get everything out of here, and then we'll have a quick look at it all whenever it's out. So, there we go. And I think that's all she got. So let's see what we got in here. First off, we've got ourselves a USB cable. This is just a micro. It's a USB 2 micro. This is your power cable. All right. Then you've got, hilariously, you've got your European power adapter, which I won't be using this, but I'm pretty sure that any of these will work. I've got plenty. And here is a card. This was promised as part of the deal, a 16 gig card that has been pre-formatted and it's ready to go. Here it is, the piece de resistance. So let's pop this thing open here and see what it looks like. It's funny, when this showed up, I didn't know what to expect, frankly, in terms of packaging. Would it be in a box? Would it be in an envelope? Could you ship something like this in an envelope that far? Well, you can, apparently, because here it is. Oh yeah. Now, feet firmly on floor as we pull this out. And this looks quite interesting. Get rid of the ESD safe bag. And then we've got here, he's actually got, this actually is, I think there's a connector into here, so this is why this is taped down. Let me see if I can find the end of the tape here. There we go. So, oh yes, and there is the main event. So, there you have it. This is the UnAmiga. Alright, get a good hard look at what you're getting here. Now, you can see the series of ports in question. You've got your joystick and mouse ports, stereo jacks right here, all three. PS2 ports for your mouse and keyboard if you decide to go that route. VGA port, power port. This is your power. You could power this thing with the jack as well. This is, I'm not sure what that is. I mean, it could be a power. I don't know what that is. I'm not sure what these two items are. We'll find out. And then you've got your SD card right there. Then you've got this, the Cyclone 5 core board. Have a quick look at that. The brains of the outfit. You've got written on here UnAmiga A500 Header 1.4, and with the credits, and they thank the people that pitched in. And then you've got down here, this is nice. They've got written in the supporters, and amazingly, I'm the #1 supporter on here. I guess due to my name. You can see if we can focus that in. Come on. Yeah, I'll take a picture and stick it there. It's got all the people that bought this. I see myself, and of course there's Tin Mark. As I look down through here, I'm going to see if I know anybody else. Oh, I see more than one or two repeat offenders, people that I know from the Amigos and from a few other podcasts. Of course, you got your buzzer there, and you've also got a header here and here. Now, and a few other headers. There's your power LEDs and whatnot. Again, this will go into a this item will go into one of the checkmate cases, which not the worst idea. Now, so what would you do with said thing? Well, I happen to have a hollowed out Amiga here. Lo and behold, standing by. And theoretically, it should fit thusly. So let's give it a shot. Look at that. That is what you're going to get when you plug this in your case. And you can see the ports line up as such. Of course, it's not using all the ports, but it wouldn't need quite a few of these. Now, how will this thing run? I mean, obviously, you won't be hooking any Amiga floppy drives up to this or any peripherals. So, why would one get this? Well, I happened to, amazingly, and I can't speak for everyone else, but I had an Amiga 500 that was no good. I've got the board sitting over there. I mean, it may be an easy fix, it may not, but I just happened to have the opportunity to have one to stick in it with a working keyboard. I should mention, in case you haven't read about these, the Amiga's keyboard will plug right in here, and so when everything is bolted in, what you should have here is an Amiga 500 with a special board. I mean, obviously, it's an FPGA. Your opinion on those may vary. In fact, mine varies daily, if you want the truth. But I thought it'd be fun to play with it, to be honest with you. And something that I found interesting is Eduardo released test footage of a RAM expansion that fits on top of the Cyclone 5 core. And with that, he was actually playing, among other things, the new ZX Next like FPGA on this board. So this board, the UnAmiga board here, to a certain extent, can act like a Mister or a Mist. I'm sure not in the same ballpark, but as such. And I must admit, I did not get in on the ground floor of the ZX Next, which looks like a brilliant project. It did very well. And I don't know if I'll get in on the next batch if they ever have one. But it would be nice to be able to kick the tires on it, frankly, without having to do much extra. I asked him what the RAM expansion would cost, and it was relatively inexpensive, $15, I think is what he said, 15 euros, which $20. That seems like a pretty fair deal, and hopefully those are a lot easier to ship and take a lot less time to get here. I've been monitoring the shipping on this. It left the point of departure May 21st, and as I record this today, it's June 22nd. So it took one full month for this board to get to me after it was shipped. So there's that. Now again, in different times, the shipping may be shorter. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to fasten this bad boy down, and we're going to kick the tires on it and see what we can do. I printed out the manual for this quite a while back. I've got it here, and if we need it, we'll consult it. And I've got a VGA monitor standing by, and so we will shoot some footage and we'll see what we think. So kick back, relax, and let's see what we can get up to. Just a note about the installation of the UnAmiga into a 1200 or a 500 case. I had trouble. I didn't expect it. Getting it to, this thing to fasten down. It's funny when you take out the bracketing and whatnot, and you can't. This metal cover won't work. It just doesn't. I mean, it doesn't fit in there like you would like. I mean, I suppose you could put it back in, but with the different ports and stuff, I'm just not going to stick that back in there. And so you've got to fasten this thing down. It's got to kind of be clever. But once you get to the point where you're ready to go, it's a simple task of just plugging the keyboard into the appropriate slot. That's pretty much all the installation says. It says to be careful with ESD and to make sure you check everything. By the way, I found out this little switch back here is a reset switch. So we've got that in. So we're going to put the top on this sucker, and then we're going to fire it up. So let's see how it goes. Okay, we've got this thing mounted in here, sorta. This was not a drag and drop situation. I went ahead and went back and used the shielding just because I'd have some place to put screws in and to actually fasten this thing down. Unfortunately, the UnAmiga does not line up perfectly to where these ports are usable, so I had to do a little Sketchy Tech and cut away areas so I could make this microphone fit. This right here would not fit without being cut away, and the SD card also was not a fit. It's barely a fit now, but it does work. And of course you've got different ports here, so you've got some empties here. Everything else fits okay. These ports here, these joystick ports, are not what I would call the most expensive. I don't think they're garbage or anything, but they're not my favorites. So we're going to go ahead and put the keyboard in this thing and give it a whirl, but that was no easy task, I can tell you that. Your mileage may vary. When I looked to find examples of how these were to be installed online, I found exactly none. So you may be looking at the only footage of an UnAmiga actually installed in an UnAmiga into a case. We will find out more as we continue. Okay, so what you were seeing there actually took place about 2 weeks ago, and it has taken me a while to get to the point where I could finish this video. A funny thing happened on the way to the UnAmiga. I had an issue, and the issue was pretty bad. Shortly after what you just saw, where I had to put the UnAmiga in the metal shielding that came with the original 500 case. Before I get a bunch of grief about snipping those ports on that case, the case is fine. The shielding was super rusty and nasty, unusable. So I didn't have any qualms about clipping some of that area out to accommodate the UnAmiga, but it's something to think about if you get an UnAmiga. Something else to think about is that the instruction manual really doesn't give you any help when it comes to mounting these. We saw Doug have issues in his video when he tried to mount this at a checkmate case, and I had some issues as well. If you're going to try to mount this in an Amiga 500, your mileage may vary, and the funny thing is the manual I had clearly was for the first revision of this board, and the pictures didn't match up to what I had. So it was sort of I was sort of left in a bad spot in terms of mounting. Now I will say, my little fix, which included pulling away a little bit of that metal, it worked. It worked well, and I've had no problems, and it mounted right up, and it sits in there quite nicely. But which you saw, but something to think about. That wasn't the big issue I had. The big issue I had was when I powered it up. I'm going to power this thing up now. It's now hooked up. This is the UnAmiga. Now don't panic. My LEDs are out on my keyboard, which, again, this was a junk 500. That's why I chose it. So I'm going to hit the on button here. You'll see I've got this mouse hooked up and this monitor. Now, do you see this little dot right here? It's hard to see on the screen there, but it's a red dot. When I powered this up for the first time, what I got was a blue dot, which I knew wasn't right because I'd seen footage of these things booting. And sure enough, when this booted up, I noticed that I had a missing color, effectively. There was a color that had something was going on. It was not firing. And so when this thing comes up to the tiny launcher here, this looked all wrong. It was all messed up. And so what's to do? Well, what I did was contacted Eduard, the gentleman that made these out of Spain, and sent him some pictures of my board. Of course, the board was pristine because it's not like you had to do anything major to put it into the Amiga 500. And he informed me that after looking over the board in detail, that I had 4 resistors that were the incorrect value. Now, these were 75K resistors, 75 kiloohm resistors. He said the correct resistors that were to be put there were 75 ohms, which is a huge difference. If you think about electronics, And I was nervous. I'm like, holy smokes. So he asked me if he said I could ship this back, which, I mean, it's fine. And I said, I think I can change these. I mean, I spent a long time at IBM doing circuit board repair, so working on these is no difficult thing for me. So I took it to work and used our equipment to put 4 75 ohm resistors on. Now, I'll tell you up front, I did not think this fix was going to work. What I thought was wrong with it, and I had mentioned this to him in an email, is that the DAC, the 24-bit DAC video chip on the board looked askew. I did a lot of pin checking back when I worked in complex repair, and it looked like that the chip was off, was not properly aligned on the pads. This is a very fine leg chip, but it just happens to be something that I did at IBM. And so anyway, I changed the resistors, hooked it back up. It did not work. Again, I had that blue dot and the colors were missing. I knew right when it started, I was like, this isn't working. So I thought, well, I've got two choices here. I can send this back to Spain, and I knew it had taken me forever to get this thing. Or I could just go ahead and say the heck with it, risk my $150 and try to repair the board myself. And so I'm fortunate in that where I work, there is a hot air knife, which you can use to reflow chips, reflow the legs on chips. And I was taking a gamble that this thing was close enough that if I added a little solder and reflowed it, I could get it to flow onto the pads. So I took it to work and fluxed it up and reflowed it. And lo and behold, glorious day, I hooked it up and it came right up. Now, Edu had also told Doug that he had the similar problem with the resistors. This problem with the resistors, I don't know what to say about, frankly. That's a pretty big mistake. If you want the truth, 4 resistors that were that far off. I mean, you're talking, I mean, 75 ohm resistors are nothing. 75 kilo ohm resistors are something. So it's strange that could happen. But having came from a manufacturing background, these things happen. All that said, I talked to Doug quite a bit, Mark, about his and the problems he was having. And I have to admit, my initial views on the UnAmiga were not positive because of the experience I had. The kind of chintzy documentation in terms of mounting the thing, the lack of support in some areas, and also, frankly, the poor, sort of overlooked design of these things. I mean, it's just amazing to me that you can miss this stuff because, like I said, I'll admit I'm a skilled. I have knowledge in the production of circuit boards, and it's funny. I just happened to have one of these that did that, and I wonder how many others are askew. I mean, what are the odds that I would know how to fix a flat pack like that, and I would get one of these in the mail? It boggles the mind. Nevertheless, I was not real high on the UnAmiga, and I will say today, July 7th. I've had a little over 2 weeks to play with the UnAmiga. I've already done a stream of gameplay, which I'll link up if you're interested in seeing the actual unit at work, because that will give you a good idea of what you're looking at. But I will tell you my feelings on this, and this is why it took me so long to make the end of this video, because I just want to really sit down and kick the tires on this thing, a working version. And I can tell you without hesitation, this is probably the best money I ever spent on an Amiga. And I say that in no uncertain terms. If you are an American who has played in the Amiga world for some time, you realize all the difficulties there are just in getting your games to run. I've got a CD32, I've got an Amiga 1200, I've got an Amiga 1000. They're all NTSC. And the only thing I ever got any good use out of was the Amiga 600 I had. It was because it was PAL. PAL is a big deal, and it's a big hassle to run games without. Let me boil it down. The Amiga is a great computer, but it's a continual pain in the butt to run anything. Anyone that's got one knows that. there's kickstarts, there's memory requirements, there's all this stuff that makes it difficult to just sit down and play a game. All right. And I can tell you folks, and anyone that knows me or the Amiga show, we play games. Me and Boat don't mess around. We play games. And I can tell you that this has changed my play style, my playing. I play so much more Amiga than I have in the past. I mean, I've got it's off camera, but there's an Amiga 1200 sitting right here, and there's an Amiga 1000 right here. This is what I use. It's simple. It almost always works. And it plays everything very crisply. This particular FPGA is clocked. I think it's 25 megahertz versus the 20 megahertz that a normal Amiga runs. And I would say this actually runs probably a little bit quicker than that. And it does its job. I want to play games. I modified this front end with all the WHD loads. It plays all the ADFs perfectly. Well, that's not true. It plays all the ADFs, but it may or may not work. Is this thing 100% compatible with all Amiga games? No. Absolutely not. We found, I can think of 2 or 3 right off the top of my head. Pinball Illusions, I cannot get to work. The AGA, the non-AGA don't work. We also can't get Zool AGA to work. And Zool also we can't get them to work without artifacts. And there are a few others. But I would rate compatibility somewhere around the 95% point thus far. And I've had about 2.5 weeks to play with this thing. The fact that you can use a Prop Ps2 Mouse, gold. It makes all the mouse games much more fun. I've got my wireless USB joystick controller hooked up, so I'm using my little generic gamepad for most of the games. Works great with this thing. You can have 2 joysticks plugged in at all the times. There's no more swapping out a mouse, which is great. Having it all in the nice package of an Amiga 500 is great. Now, here's the $1 million question. If Edu runs another batch of these, would I recommend them? 2 weeks ago, I would have unequivocally said no. But I'm going to, Edu is a prolific hardware designer and does a lot of good work. And I suspect that the mistakes made on the UnAmiga version 2 will be rectified in the 3rd version. So, giving this man the benefit of the doubt, would I recommend the UnAmiga for if he runs a 3rd wave, which I've been told he will be doing? Absolutely. I would recommend it to people that just want to play games. I would recommend it to people that don't want to screw around. Doug looked at various productivity software and stuff, and he seemed to be happy with awesome. But as far as I'm concerned, the price is right for your gamer. Now, do you need to put this in an A500 case? You can. Would I sacrifice an A500 for a working one? No. But if I had a junk case sitting around, would I do it? Absolutely. Would I do it if I had to build my own little case? Yes. Would I put this in a Checkmate? Probably not. If you're spending all that money in a Checkmate, you probably ought to put something in there that is more fitting the case. I mean, I think this is a little bit subpar for that. But I think it's overall the quality on this thing, once I fixed it, has been astoundingly good. And you get a lot of options to run a lot of stuff. You being able to switch between the 68,000 all the way up to 6820 on the fly is great. Being able to toggle slow memory and fast memory is great. I mean, you really do accommodate a lot of games. And I told Doug when we were discussing this, one thing you've got to remember about these is that when you're having trouble running stuff, it's not necessarily the UnAmiga's fault. This is an Amiga. You're going to run into problems because that's just the way it is. Sometimes you have to use weird software to get stuff to run, do kickstarts and whatnot. But there are some glitches in here. I don't know if they're FPGA glitches or they're UnAmiga glitches because I don't have an FPGA. This is the first one I've ever had. Now, for those of you who say the FPGA is not a true Amiga, you're right. I can't lie to you. I can't disagree with you. I have always used emulation. Never had a problem with it. I'm just one of those guys. I've got plenty of real Amigas here, and so this will be my day-to-day game playing Amiga in quotes. It's not a hang-up for me, to be honest with you. Plus, the proof of the matter is the thing is $125 or euros plus tax or whatever. I think I've got about 150 American dollars in it, give or take. I've been told that the new version of this is going to run around 150 euros, so about $25 more. It's worth it. This is a great solution for a game player or someone who just likes to have ease of use. There's something to be said for just having all the Amiga software at your fingertips without the daily struggle. You don't have to worry about 30-year-old hardware. You don't have to worry about swapping around compact flash cards. You don't have to worry about a bad disk drive. You don't have to worry about a blown cap. What you've got to do is sit down and play your games or do what you want to do. And if you look at it from that aspect, I think a lot of people would agree that it's a good purchase. So that's my 2 cents worth. I've had some footage floating over this while you've been watching, which from my live stream. If you want to catch my live stream with Amiga, I will link it up at the end of the video. We had a good time. We tried a lot of different stuff, and I should be doing another one real soon. But I just wanted to summarize the video today after a few weeks of play and tell you that I do, in fact, give this a high recommendation, provided that Edu on his next round takes care of these flaws. And one final thought, which I've talked with Bode about and with Doug, when you buy one of these boutique, very limited run products, you don't know who's making them. You don't know what kind of quality is done in the R&D or the parts or the design, if there were design issues, or who's making them, who's manufacturing them. So you've got to be willing to risk that money, frankly. I mean, it is a gamble. And I can gamble. I'm not a rich man, but I can gamble $125 on this, especially since I knew that Edu had a good rep and lived up to it. Again, he stood by his product and was more than happy to take it back and replace it. And luckily, I didn't have to take it. I didn't have to take that in. But it's something to consider when you buy one of these things, because, and not just these, with anything, you may want it. It may sound great, but make darn sure you're confident in the gentleman or lady that's selling it to you, because at the end of the day, all you have is their word that these things are going to work or get shipped, for that matter. So it's something to think about. And when you put things in perspective like that, you really can't get mad at anybody, because you knew the risk you were taking when you sent them the cash. So that's sort of my philosophy on it. Anyway, that's all from me, your Sketchy Tech Amigo Aaron. I'll catch you guys on the flip side. And until next time, adios.